Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Amerigo by Stefan Feld, published by Queen Games. This dates back to 2013, it accommodates 2 to 4 players and takes about 90 minutes to play. The concept of the game is that you are trying to explore these different islands to try colonize them, and you're gaining victory points in loads of different ways, and obviously the player with the most victory points at the end of the game is going to be the winner. Now, if you're vaguely or even slightly familiar with this game, you'll probably associate it with the fact that it comes with a cube tower, which is basically a tower where you're going to put a bunch of cubes in and with all different colours, and that's going to determine the actions players can take each turn. A bit gimmicky, you might think, but it's actually very functional and a very fun and useful bit of kit that comes with the game to make this quite a bit different than most other games on the market, to be honest. So as I said, it's a point salad style game, so you can get points in all different ways, and there's going to be 7 different actions you can take on each go, or depending on the outcome of that cube tower. And each action is associated with a different colour and 7 cubes of that colour. And at the end of the game, or at the start of the game, you're going to put all the cubes of all the different colours into the tower. Some of them are going to come right through, and some of them are going to stay in the different ledges and stuff in there, which means that they're going to be kind of being held in the tower, which means in future turns, when you put more things in the tower, they might be knocked down and maybe be optional for further actions down the road. So the game is 5 rounds, and there's kind of 7 phases to each of those rounds. And each phase is associated with a different action. So you've got the blue action, which lets you travel, basically move your boats around the different islands. And so say, I suppose what I should explain first is how the actions actually work. So say I put a bunch of blue cubes in the tower, and maybe 4 blue cubes come out, a red cube come out, and a black cube comes out. Now that means that I can either take the red action, the black action, or the blue action, but the strength of that action is going to be equal to the most numerous amount of cubes of a colour. So for example, this case would be 4. So you could take a 4 blue action, a 4 red action, or a 4 blue action. So let's talk about what the actions are. So as I said, the blue ones is your movement action, where you're going to sail around the different islands, and the importance of this is that you're trying to get your ships on the different docks. And the first person to get a ship to a dock is going to get 3 points. But it's also important because you're going to need those docks in order to colonize on those islands, which is going to be a huge way you're going to get points. There's quite a bit of attention to this, as there's a race for these different islands, and the game is randomly set up each time because the board is modular. Sometimes you're going to get lots of small islands, sometimes you're going to get really big islands, and that can be very important for a number of reasons. The second action is cannons. With a lot of Stefan Feld games, if you're familiar with them, the game usually almost fights back against you in some way or another, and if you don't combat that, you're going to lose a lot of points. Amerigo is no different, where each round there's going to be a pirate token that comes out, and they're going to vary, I think, in strength 4 down to 0. And at the end of each round, you're going to have to fight off those pirates by matching as many cannons as you can. And if you don't, you're going to lose victory points equal to the number of pirates on the board. So black actions are going to simply let you move up the cannon track to stock up on cannons to fight off those pirates. The next one is the red action, and the red action is very important because it's your planning action, where you're going to take all these different tiles, either from your personal supply or from the communal pile, which means that they're all different shapes, like Tetris shapes. And you're going to use them to basically colonize on the islands for a different action, and they cost action points equal to basically the number of squares that they cover if they're from the communal pool, or if they're from your personal pool, they all cost 1 each. So you've got a bit of planning there. You've got to kind of pick the different shapes you can get in order to fill up the islands as quickly as possible. The next action is the technology action, which is the brown action. And that lets you move up a track, and whenever you get to certain points on a track, not only do you get more victory points at the end of the game, but also at certain checkpoints you're going to take a technology tile off the central board and put it onto your own board, which either gives you kind of one-off powers, or permanent powers, or even end-game scoring powers as well. So there's a good tension there because you want to get the powers that you really want. Every round they're going to kind of refresh, so you can miss out on ones that you want if you don't get up these tracks quick enough. The next one is the green action, which lets you build on the different islands. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the red action, but this time you're going to spend basically action points equal to the number of tiles you're putting down in order to cover up the islands and score victory points that way. The first person to complete an island is going to get additional victory points, and also a bit like in the Castles of Burgundy, you're going to get rewarded for completing things earlier and get bigger modifiers. So, for example, you're going to multiply the number of different docks you've got on a certain island by the round number that you finished it on. So if you finish in the first round, you're going to score a lot higher multiplier than if you score it in the later round. So you've got that kind of tug of war where you're going to go for lots of the smaller islands and score bigger points, or maybe the bigger islands where you've got lots of docks on and maybe score them later. But you obviously going to get more points that way, but you're going to get lower multipliers. So there's that tension there. The next action is the, I believe it's the yellow action. So the yellow action is important because when you build on these different islands, you're going to have certain different resources or different kind of produce that you're going to cover over. And when you do cover over those tiles, you're going to take them onto your personal board. And then with your yellow actions, you can buy these other tiles, and they kind of go hand in hand together, and they multiply with each other to get end-game points. And finally, you've got the white action, which relates to a separate track, which determines turn order. And turn order is very important for a number of reasons, because not only do you want to get the tiles that you want to travel faster than other players, you want to get the technology that you want. So being first is very important, but also you're going to unlock points for the end game scoring, but every spot that you move up is associated with a different colour, which is obviously related to a different action. And then from kind of once you've moved on the white track, from then on, every action you take with the white cubes is associated with that colour as well. So you've got a bit of mitigation there with your white cubes. And that's basically how the game's going to flow. You're going to basically use these very simple decisions on the number of colours that come out and the strength that comes out. And but the thing with this game is you really do want to do all things at once. You've got to be very careful about which choices you're going to make and when, based on the turn order. Because, for example, you might really have to use your black actions when it's the black's turn to stock up with those cannons. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of points. But there might be an opportunity to, say if there's 7 black cubes there and a red cube, there's not going to be much opportunity to take a strength 7 red action at the same time. So every decision is very agonizing, because you do want to do everything as strong as possible, and you can't do it all. You have to take one or the other, and that's a very difficult decision to make. I love how how the game forces you to make just a few very simple decisions each turn, because sometimes you might only get 2 cubes or 2 different color cubes, and have to decide which one of those 2 actions you're going to take at a really strong strength. But sometimes you might get 5 different colors out, but there will be lower strength. So the kind of the variation that the game throws at you is really interesting, and every decision, or you want to compete in all those different fields, and you basically can't, because you're going to have to forfeit your ability to fight the pirates in order to buy more tiles. But you also want to build at the same time, and you want to build quicker because you want to get the higher multipliers. Do you want to get those crop tiles before your opponent does? Do you want to travel more so you can get more stations down or more docks down? And it's all just absolutely brilliant, and it ties together fantastically, and it just doesn't overwhelm you, even though there's a lot going on. But because you've only got a few decisions to make each turn, it's very kind of easy to digest, but still has a lot of meaningful decisions throughout. So yeah, mechanically, very smooth, very simple. The cube tower is so interesting. It's very, it's very tactile. It's fun to use, and it's just very satisfying just to see what comes out and stuff like that. The Tetrisy puzzle as well is very interesting, because, as I said, you've got your limited pool of your own personal colonies that you can put out, and they're very cheap, but they give you a lot smaller kind of points return as the communal ones, where if you build them, you're going to get a lot of points, but obviously they're going to cost a lot more red cubes to do so. So again, everything just blends together and is weighted very well, and it doesn't seem like there's anything that's kind of distinctively better than the rest. I really do love that. I also love the different technologies that you can get in this game. They're all very useful and they're very kind of dynamic and interesting. There's one of the things I go on about quite a bit is when games offer you kind of buildings or technologies and they're all quite boring and you don't really care about which one you get. But this one, when you do cross that line for a technology, there's ample choice and you want them all. Some of them might just boost up your action points of a certain color. So for example, from then on, you might be able to get +2 for every blue cube you take. So, you can travel around a lot quicker, or you've got the ones that let you build quicker, or let you buy produce quicker. But you've also got ones that give you money, and money is important because money lets you boost up your future actions and is also worth victory points at the end of the game. Or are you just going to take the towers that just give you 7 straight victory points? So loads of different technologies, and they're all extremely interesting, and I absolutely love that. So yeah, turns are nice and smooth, nice and quick. I love the tension of who wants to go first, so that white track is very important as well. The time investment, I mean, in terms of how this game takes about an hour and a half to play, but the time really does fly by because you're always engaged about which cubes are going to come out of the tower, and you're always on the end of your seat and deciding which one of these simple choices you're going to make, but they're all extremely meaningful and extremely useful. Replayability wise, I mean, the variability of the setup is fantastic. I mean, you get a bunch of different tiles with the game, which are going to completely change the landscape of all the different islands. As I said before, you're going to have some huge islands, and the big islands are very important because you've got a lot more landmass that you can bosh the big tiles down on. Also, you've got more room for a lot more docks, which is going to get you huge multipliers. And also, if they're big enough, you can get treasure chests as well if you're the one to complete it, and the treasure chests give you money. And again, money is extremely important. So yeah, you've got that, or you can maybe just go around all the small different islands and try and get lots of different, little drabs of 3 points each by colonizing them first, or by setting your docks up first. You can be quite clever and try and kind of lock people out of getting onto your islands by building over the dock spaces. So there's a good interaction there. There's a great interaction of who wants to go first, who wants to build on certain spots first, because a lot of the times you're going to be sharing islands. So yeah, a great amount of player interaction, great uptime, just a real good fun factor with this one. Aesthetically is one of the kind of pitfalls of the game, at least in terms of the player or the actual kind of main island board. I mean, it's very basic to look at. Don't get me wrong, I think it looks a lot better in person than it does in images and stuff. But again, pretty basic. There's not a lot of finesse there. And same with the kind of the resource boards and your own player boards. They're pretty basic, but they're very functional. And the iconography is actually really good with this game. That's something that should be said. You're not going to have to look at the rulebook or anything like that. As your games go on, once you kind of know the symbology, you're going to know it, and there's not anything kind of fiddly to get your head around. Component quality is really good, to be fair. Queen Games do make good productions. The cube tower is really good, just a nice kind of centerpiece to the table, and it just works really well, and it does what it should do. And the theme-wise as well, it works pretty well. I mean, the idea of just exploring around all the different islands, colonizing them, fighting off pirates, for a Feld game, it works really well. And the setup and teardown time as well is actually pretty damn good, because you just got to set up the different map, and basically put a bunch of the cubes in the tower, separate them, and you're pretty much good to go round one. So yeah, no issues there at all. The game has a great kind of like a progression or cadence to it, where obviously as you're gaining more and more gold and more of these technology tiles, you're going to get more powerful as the game goes on. So it's got a good sense of progression. The tension is going to ramp up as well, because the island spaces are going to get smaller and smaller, which you're going to want to build on. The dock spaces are going to go smaller and smaller, or going to get less and less. So the tension of getting there first is going to ramp up, and it scales really well too. I mean, it works perfectly well at 2 players, and it's going to work equally as well at 4 players. And in terms of comparing this to another game, I'm not really quite sure what else I could compare it to. I mean, it does have that very distinct feature of the cube tower, which up to myself, I've not really played another game with a cube tower. I've not played, Shogun or anything like that. But yeah, this one, it just has a very distinctive feel to it. And I don't immediately compare it to anything else, even though it does have some kind of crossover with Feld's other games, you know, with the pirate mechanism and with the you know, trying to complete islands first mechanism that's kind of linked to Burgundy. But yeah, overall this game is so much fun. I mean, I've absolutely blown away with how good this game is. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Stefan Feld games. I've not had a single, you know, dud for me. I've enjoyed every single one of them, but for me, this one is top tier. I've always kind of put Trajan kind of forefront of all the Stefan Feld games I've played. It's unanimous, you know, definitely my favourite game of his. But, you know, a not too distant second was the Oracle of Delphi. And this one, to be honest, I'm kind of splitting hairs with which one I put in front of either Amerigo or the Oracle of Delphi. So this is definitely a close second or third for me. It's just that good. It is so much fun. The fun factor with this game is a lot stronger than a lot of his other games, because I understand, and I know all his games are completely mechanically sound, but I can understand why people don't like his games because they are generally quite dry. That's something that doesn't bother me, but with this game, I think you can introduce this to anybody and they will have a good time. So I think this is a great jumping on point for Stefan Feld games, which is something I don't say for a lot of his games, like Luna, for example, which I reviewed not so long ago. I think that one is something that's not going to be a great starting point because there's a bit more, you know, the strategies are a bit more opaque. But this one, you know what you want to do, and you've got to try to do it as best as you can. So I do really like that. So much fun, really engaging, quick player turns, and just the cube tower is so much fun and just really tactile. So yeah, there's one very, very small complaint, well, maybe not even a complaint, it might just be a bit of something I've experienced with my first few plays with it, is that I almost feel like you can get too much done during a game. So, you know, you tend to get very high up the technology track. You tend to have, you know, got a lot of your colonies out. You tend to have got a lot of the docks, or most or all the docks explored. So, you know, with a lot of really great Euros, you kind of want to be restricted and not being able to do everything. This one, I think it's slightly over there, you know, leans slightly towards being able to do too much, but that might be the experience I've had so far. Maybe the tower's been a bit more generous than it normally is. But yeah, that's a very, very minor complaint. But again, it hasn't sullied my experience at all. I can't wait to play this more. I would happily play this again and again and again and again because it is so much fun and just really satisfying. So that is Amerigo by Stefan Feld, one of his best games, and I don't say that lightly because all his games are amazing. This one is definitely a top 3 for me of Stefan Feld games at this point. So it gets an amazing rating from me, which I give out very sparingly. Definitely, I confidently say this is probably going into my top 20 games of all time, maybe even creeping into my top 10, depending on what my future plays entail. So that's my review of Amerigo. I hope you've enjoyed it. Definitely check this one out if you're a fan of Feld, because this one's not so popular as some of his other games. So if you have enjoyed the review, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.